Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on Doordarshan, India's national television channel about India's international relations, Indian foreign policy, and key countries and groupings around the world with whom India is advancing its relationships. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking a close look at the continent of Europe, the European Union in specific, how it has strengthened and become a major player in the world, and the challenges and opportunities for the European Union as it navigates a difficult global scenario, and how India and Europe can cooperate to make a better world order. And to discuss this, I have with me a very special guest, a distinguished member of the diplomatic community in India, the Ambassador of Lithuania to India, Diana Mickeviciene. Ambassador Mickeviciene.
Namaste.
Thank you, and thank you for being on Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you very much, and namaste to everyone.
Ambassador Mickeviciene is serving as the current Lithuanian ambassador to India, and is also has a long background of dealing with the EU on behalf of her country. She's a convinced Europeanist, and she believes in strengthening and fortifying Europe. So, Ambassador, it's a great honor to have you here today.
Thank you for having me over.
Ambassador, when we talk of Europe, people often refer to the historical quip of Henry Kissinger that if I have to talk to Europe, who do I call, right? He mocked at Europe at one time, saying that, it's all fragmented and disunited and nobody knows what is the core of Europe. But we are seeing lately in last few years, there is a clear, definite momentum towards unifying the continent, especially after the Brexit and after the UK left. It looked like the 27 member countries, Lithuania is now celebrating 20 years of EU membership also, and you're very proud of that, I know. Europe seems to have a momentum and seems to be slowly, moving in a direction of becoming an important power center in the world, distinct from China, distinct from the US. So if you could start by reflecting on the strengths of Europe, and especially the European Union, what do you think can be its essential qualities that make it such a formidable force in the world?
Well, if I could start by quipping back at and questioning that, because I think now it's very, very clear that it's very known to whom we have to call when we need to speak to Europe. And as a project, first of all, peace project, European Union, to be precise, is an unparalleled creation, which is proven once, then and again, that it's an unprecedentedly successful mission. So my country, together with 9 others, we were 10 to join the European Union 20 years ago, which we have just celebrated, is just one proof, and I think it's a very solid proof, because it's been a most successful round, big round of joining Europe in enlargement. And I remember, all this European direction had to be ratified by popular referendum in every
Each
country.
Yeah.
My country came out as we were all for, and overwhelmingly for. All nations said yes to joining Europe, but my country, I remember, was probably the first in terms of the turnout, positive results. And 20 years from then, we are again, I think, Euro optimists. It's not just me, it's not my personal opinion. We are all very persuaded, because what we gained. We know what we had not had in the past. We had not enjoyed freedom of movement. We had not enjoyed the right of movement at all in Soviet Union. During the occupation, going abroad was like traveling to space, more or less, of that desired and unreachable level. So what we got with all the mobility, with ability to go and study, to work, to come back, to set up businesses across the border, to really, embrace each and every good thing that, European Union has developed. So this is, first of all and foremost, a peace project, which turned into a super successful economic project. Now we are the second biggest economy in the world, if you collectively count European Union economies. We have a single largest market, a trading bloc, We are, in the leading positions in all the world, and look at, the number of people who want to come to Europe. So I think it's just a proof, our own internal mobility. People new young people in Lithuania have been, now selected and voted like the happiest, the ones under 30, they consider themselves happiest of all in the global happiness index, just because they're born with that idea that, you can go whenever, wherever you want, you're free, you will always get support, you will get a scholarship, you will be able to, realize your potential. And I think it's just been great. And look at what Germany and France have become. They're best friends, they're best partners. So it's an amazing story.
It's an amazing story, and the integration, viewers, closer and closer union has been a step-by-step process. Like Ambassador is saying, it has also been ratified individually within countries. So there is a legitimacy to the project. Sometimes you hear the Eurosceptics saying that EU is supranational and it is not answerable to the people, and there is a gap between the EU structures and the ordinary masses. But then overall, the direction is that it has also created a lot of benefits for ordinary people living on the continent, and everybody who wants to see it can see it, the changes that have happened as a result of the integration. Talking of integration, viewers, Ambassador already mentioned France and Germany have always been the leading powers in the European Union, steering the European Union. One is supposed to be the horse and the other is the coachman, so that kind of thing, and they've always been like that. And there I'd like you to watch something very interesting, excerpts of a recent speech made by the French President Emmanuel Macron, talking about the threats that Europe is facing given the security situation with Russia, and also calling for closer and closer defense and security integration so that the EU as a whole can be a real power bloc. Let's watch President Macron's remarks and continue the discussion.
Europe today is mortal. It could die. That's what French President Emmanuel Macron warned on Thursday in a speech at the Sorbonne University in Paris. He called for stronger, more integrated European defences as he outlined his vision for an increasingly assertive European Union on the global stage.
We have to be clear about the fact that our Europe today is mortal. It could die. It could die, and that depends solely on our choices.
Thursday's speech was billed by Macron's advisers as France's contribution to the EU's strategic agenda for the next 5 years. With just 3 years left of his second and final term in office, the 46-year-old wants to show his critics he retains the energy and fresh thinking that brought him the presidency in 2017. In the nearly 2-hour monologue, he said Russia must not be allowed to win in Ukraine, and called for a boost in Europe's cybersecurity capacity, closer defence ties with Britain, and a European academy to train high-ranking military personnel.
The Sino-American tension has led to a growth in spending on arms and technological innovation, to the increase in military capability. We now have regional powers which are increasing their capacity, Russia and Iran to mention just two. And Europe is in a situation of being encircled, pushed by a number of these powers on its borders, and sometimes from within.
Macron has long called for European strategic autonomy involving less reliance on the United States, a stance that has gained greater resonance in the face of Donald Trump's bid to return to the White House.
So viewers, we just heard Macron in his usual, radical style saying that Europe might even die and we cannot take it for granted and we have to fight for it and to integrate closer and become one force, especially in the security realm. Coming back to Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Lithuania, who's with me. Ambassador, Macron and the French tradition, they've always insisted on this strategic autonomy and that Europe should build itself as a third force. From Charles de Gaulle onwards, they have had this long way of thinking to position Europe as distinct from the US especially. And now you hear his speech in the Sorbonne where he's saying that we have to reduce dependence on the US and we have to actually go in a separate direction which is autonomous. So on this point, I know 27 countries, always the consensus on every issue is difficult. And you have a lot of summits and a lot of gatherings all the time to bring agreement on these issues. But do you think that this autonomy is a realistic one, and what is the viewpoint of what is the diversity of views within the EU on this question? Because in India, people would like to know, is the EU like a country, with a single foreign policy, and can it have a single defense policy, a single immigration policy, all these things. So can they be really autonomous, and can they really cohere as a, more forceful union?
Well, EU is not one country, EU is 27 countries, but to the question if you can have one common foreign and security policy, I'm saying yes, because we have one, which is an evolving policy, because we are also facing evolving challenges. So of course we have to evolve our answers. And in a way, the accents that you put on the French President Macron's speech are probably also a little interesting to me, because that's what you see from outside, but from insider's perspective, what I can tell is probably more about my region in Central, Eastern, Baltic area, where we put accents on very similar things. So I think one thing which is a very important thing is that yes, we have to make ourselves more safe, and it was probably not correct, and not just even for United States to realize that we totally depend on their protection. Europe has to have its own security, provisions, and it's just very rightly so. It's so demonstrated by this war. Second thing, I don't think that autonomy means autonomy from. Autonomy, and in that sense, I know it's very popular in India to look at this great power game, as if a sort of a chessboard view. But whatever happens, no matter what we decide as a EU, as a bloc, we'll always be very close to US, and it's just no question. So
because the values, because the democracy, all
of
those
so
things.
much that has connected us until now, and will remain, as a very important connecting, the glue, so to say. So there is no even question, and I think President Macron has also emphasized so many times that there's no question of being between US and China, because we'll always be so much closer to the US, and we have a strategic partnership. We have strategic alignment on all the issues, and it's probably very fair of US to expect EU to contribute more, on defense, of its own defense. So we can only cheer that resolution. I think it's not just resolution, it's what has been happening a lot in terms of, defense industry, modernization, investment, military industries, capacities that are happening. So I think we are very much on the right track.
And Ambassador, talking of the the transatlantic connection, obviously NATO is the big glue that holds this together. And whenever they, for example, when the first Trump administration was there, Macron even went out and said that NATO is brain dead. And there is, if there is a return to that kind of a dispensation from next year in the US, there's always the question, can the Europeans on their own support the Ukrainian resistance if the US steps back? And everybody is speculating about the capacity of Europe, and they're saying the real test of Europe was not since 2022 when the Russian invasion happened, but it's going to come if there is a change in the US policy. So what are your thoughts on that, and how committed do you think the EU can be to muster the resources and to make sure that the Ukrainian resistance will continue?
Well, I think what is very important is that we have to develop our own capabilities for defense, because we have to defend ourselves, and the challenges are on our borders. We'll be the one, and my country is the frontline country, so we'll be bearing brunt. But the understanding in European Union is very clear that any assault on a meter of European Union territory will be an assault against us. Of that we have no doubts. So very, very clear and very just, very, very needed development that is, as I said, is already happening. Well, whatever are developments in the US, I would not like to speculate. Neither I would speculate on what happens, whether Europe is able to defend Ukraine, because I think that, this war, so necessary, so unfortunate. And look at the end game. Russians have already lost Ukraine for ages. They might, no matter if they take a village or 100 villages, they have lost Ukrainians. There will be hatred versus Russia for 100 years, unless the new peace project comparable of EU comes in, which is probably unlikely. for some time. And the end game for Ukrainians has been to survive, so they have survived. Whatever happens, and now no matter, I mean, it's a matter of cost and it's a matter of pain, which I think everybody's interest is to start to cut short as soon as possible, including the global community, because, well, this might be a European war, but it's definitely with a global, very global consequences, and it might turn into a global war, because as I said, you know, the intentions have been clearly beyond Ukraine. So if we are unable to help Ukraine, we'll pay a much bigger price. So that's
Right.
for us to choose how much price, what big price we have to pay. And I think the decisions are very, very clear on that. We just can't afford that.
That's a diplomatic answer also. But viewers, so far we have spoken about Europe and its own periphery and its security. But Europe is also becoming a global actor in different regions of the world. It has an external action service of its own. It has a high representative for foreign affairs, like a foreign minister for the whole EU. And Europe has also indicated a greater interest in the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, Europe is readjusting or rethinking its relationship with one of the big heavyweights in the world, the other great power center, which is China. On this, I have a very interesting video clip of Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent Europe visit with a focus on Serbia, which is a candidate member to become to enter the European Union, and also to Hungary. And let's watch this very interesting development where China continues to invest in certain countries in Europe and try to divide the European Union in a certain way to its geopolitical advantage. Let's watch this clip and continue the discussion.
Belgrade's streets were decorated with Chinese flags, and Xi and Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić were greeted by a cheering crowd in front of the presidential palace. Since 2020, China has been the single largest investor in Serbia, Vučić said, an investment that's up 30-fold over the past decade. More than 24 agreements were signed during this visit, promoting legal, regulatory, and economic cooperation. And both leaders said they would support each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, meaning that Serbia considers Taiwan, viewed by Beijing as a breakaway province, to be part of China, just as China considers Kosovo, which declared independence in 2008, as part of Serbia. Vučić said Serbia and China are moving from strategic relations to, quote, a community that talks about the shared future of our two countries.
So viewers, Xi Jinping being given a red carpet in Belgrade, and the Serbian leaders saying we are not only interested in strategic partnership but also in a community for common destiny of a shared humanity, and all these things are Chinese phrases, and certainly China has had influence, tremendous influence in some European countries, and increasingly that is at odds with the EU's own perception that China is becoming a major economic competitor and a systemic rival. So I have with me Her Excellency the Ambassador of Lithuania still with me in the studio. Let me come back to her. Ambassador, you have been, quite critical of China and Chinese presence and Chinese approach to your country and to Europe, and your views are quite clear. But then you have people like Vučić and Viktor Orban and so many others who think that actually China is still an economic opportunity and should be welcomed. And on this count, how coherent is the EU or Europe as a whole vis-a-vis China? And we recently spoke to the EU ambassador to India, and he was also saying that we are now preparing for a tough pushback on China on trade and unfair practices, and that on values and democracy it's a systemic rival. So he was quite clear that the EU is actually going to brace itself for a long pushback against China. But given this mixed picture that we are seeing, with some countries still opening the door to China in such a way, how coherent is the EU approach to China?
Whoever says that EU is not united or mixed up in that approach, I would say a very clear no. Because again, you have a development, you have many of the gurus of international relationships who are still probably teaching at our universities were all saying 20 years ago how wonderful partner China is, what an important economy is it, lets us all go and engage, and we will also facilitate the opening of the country to the benefit of everybody. So we should also look at ourselves and how we saw China and how we share that heads-on engagement, which would be a very normal thing. But for the fact that, China has not behaved by the rules. So EU, if you look at it, it was in fact incredibly pioneering, strategy that EU adopted as early as 2019, which named engagement with China in 3 different, chapters or pillars. One is the partner, strategic partner, because it's an important partner both by economic size and role, but also by a global role on various global issues. As an economic competitor, which is again, I think, a very neutral term because we are all competitors, even EU, we are all competitors. But the third and most important pillar, which many argued was not correct at that time, saying it's a systemic rival or systemic, competitor, where exactly the problem comes out, because this is a partner who has not played by the rules so much and who has abused that sort of credit of trust given, by engaging with it so much that we have to push back on EVs, right? Before it was solar, the solar industry has been practically killed by a chief influx of solar, devices from China. So of course, any engagement is good unless it harms your own interests. And many countries in Europe are heavily engaged, economically engaged. India is heavily engaged with China. I mean, you want it or not, but India's trade with China is very, very substantial. And look at, what you're buying in the shops. It's very often, things made in China, probably at a detriment of one or the other local industry. So how to deal with this situation? I think this triple approach has really served us. And unfortunately, fortunately our eyes have opened, but unfortunately we have to realize that in this relationship, more and more of the third pillar starts dominating over the other 2. We can easily compete, no problem if it's a level playing field. If what we give to a partner, we also get the same treatment, if we all play by the same rules, if what we say to each other's audiences is, can travel on equal terms. Now, of course, we have seen that China narratives, Chinese propaganda has been really, going wild in various corners of the world and Europe, but try to say something on the Chinese public space. How long will it? It will not even.
They take advantage of our open democracies.
How to compete? That's exactly, I think. So what EU has been trying to do. I mean, there again, I will argue that it is extremely united on the approach that needs to balance this relationship against the rules, and it's not calling out China per se. And we have not been anti-China as per se. No, we have called out the practices, and I think if you look globally. No one better than EU called out Chinese practices, from human rights violations to unfair trade,
in Hong Kong,
to
in Xinjiang,
so many things. We have also suffered. Our businesses suffered increasing, and repeatedly, because the politicians have called out China. So I only expect that we all do the same, and then
so I think the competitive
is,
dynamic seems like it's going to be more prominent in the way Europe deals with China more than the cooperation going into the future. But Ambassador, talking of India now, if you are the US and you looked at India, then obviously India is the big democratic counterweight to China. And the US is very clear, there's a great power competition, we have to counterbalance and push back the Chinese, right? But what about the Europeans? I mean, what are they, for them, what is India ultimately, I mean, at the big picture level, our audiences would like to know, what is the strategic importance of India for the European Union?
Well, we're not talking power politics here, for sure. I mean, we want to be, and we are, a strong pillar in the world architecture, but we want to engage, and we are engaging India precisely as a partner who plays by the rules. And my own country, being very small, and our presence in Indo-Pacific has been limited until recently. We have adopted an Indo-Pacific strategy, in our own way. European Union as a bloc has an Indo-Pacific strategy, which exactly lines up what we can do together, and so much we can do together because we are democracies, largest democracies. We are playing by the rules. We respect UN Charter. We have not attacked our neighbors. We have never weaponized trade as a major, blockade or instrument to quell our adversary or our opponent, in a discussion. So I think we have to be the ones who assure that this is not what becomes a practice, because we know that, yes, there have been these global security initiatives, global development initiatives, which are quietly crawling into the UN system to become that order which exactly we want to protect. So I think it's very important, and India's role here is indispensable, because it's been a very faithful UN, partner, UN member. Yes, India wants to play a bigger role, and I think it deserves this bigger role, because every fifth human being on earth is Indian, so it's just very pure mathematics. But it's much more than mathematics, because it represents a certain universally agreed model, which humans thought when setting up UN Charter, that this is good for everybody, it's good for all, and it's of extreme importance to just not only keep it but sustain it and show it for the others. But also economies. Look at the economies, and populations. You are now number 5 as an economy. Very likely to be number 3 very soon. Collectively, European Union is the second largest economy. So the FTA that we are negotiating, which is taking time, and it's the most complicated FTA in the world that anyone has ever seen, because you are such a large market with so many complexities, and we are the largest market, second largest market, with 27 markets, which also need to work their own priorities. So lots of things at stake. Then the third pillar is security, hard security, soft security, especially, where I think lots of work has been going on. And we have maritime security, we have counterterrorism, we have climate, we have so many disaster management, where things are already happening in a big way. Mobility, students, talents traveling both ways. So absolutely.
So this is a big relationship, viewers. Our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, always says that India-Europe, in trade, in technology, in maritime security, there's so many areas where Europe is an indispensable strategic partner for us. And given this global environment of the polarization between China and the US, you can look at India and the European Union as two emerging power centers, both of which have a lot in common. I want to thank Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Lithuania, for sharing valuable insights for our audience. And we've just celebrated Europe Day and Europe Weeks, and we hope that Europe-India and Lithuania-India relations will go from strength to strength. Thank you so much for being on national television.
Thank you for having me over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste, everyone.
So viewers, Europe and India is looking up. There are so many areas of cooperation, and especially in advanced technologies and in defense and so many other civilian sectors as well. I think the next 10 years probably are going to be a golden period for EU-India relations. So as we celebrate the milestones of the past, it's important to keep in mind that there is so much strategic convergence between India and Europe, and we need to maximize it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.